I started watching the Boys TV show.
Oh boy, here we go. We've read the books. That didn't steer you away, huh?
No. I'm trying to pace myself. Me and my wife started watching it together.
Kids are in bed, right?
Kids were in bed.
Okay.
And she thought it was pretty corny and hokey. So I was given permission to watch it without her. So, usually when I'm eating breakfast after I just drop the kids off, before I start the housework or any other work I have to do, I would catch an episode. The Boys, I'm through season 1, finished that today. And I have to say, I'm enjoying it a ton better than I did the book. It's, they have to have some limits so they can't get so pornographic. But I mean, it's still there and it's very bloody, detailed graphically, but I do enjoy it. It's kind of fun. It's not the best show ever. It's not even close, but as it got along, began to actually like some of the characters, and it became a little less corny. Now they haven't done any of the super risky stuff, like some of the stuff we've read. I hear season 2 and 3 are a little more like that, so I might not enjoy that as much.
Mm-hmm.
For now, I gave it a try, and it was okay. I mean, nothing you can watch with your kids who are younger, 35, but more surprising than I thought. And it doesn't necessarily follow the books, at least what I've read of it, as much. I mean, it did a little bit, but
I'd seen that apparently, because Simon Pegg was clearly the inspiration of the character for the sidekick type guy.
Yeah.
But years have passed and he can't play that young kid. But apparently he does make a cameo or make some appearances down the road.
He's Huey's dad.
Huey, that's Huey.
Yeah, so he's the dad of his own character. Which is funny, and he shows up a few times. I mean, he doesn't have a big part or anything, but he shows up a few times to try and give advice to Huey. And the actor who plays Huey's, doesn't look anything like him. It's not supposed to be Simon Pegg's son or whatever.
Yeah,
he does a good job. The actor who does Homelander is really creepy, and they do a good job with that too.
Carl Urban,
Carl Urban,
praises
who's good at everything.
Yeah.
He's an amazing actor who, he could just stand there and I could just watch him and I'd be enjoying, my time. He's got Dirk Squarejaw looks and and some fine acting chops.
You're listening to And This Is Why I Love Comics. Andy and Mike!
We must complain about everything good or bad. And welcome to another episode of And This Is Why I Love Comics. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And we are back again. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We are the podcast for old friends talking comic books and curmudgeonness. And we like to complain and get off our lawn stuff. And we just chat away. Somebody had posted on our Facebook page that the last episode couldn't wait to listen to our podcast about Jack Kirby because of all he would learn from it. And I had to mention that we're really not a learning podcast. We don't teach you anything. There's plenty of those. We just give our opinion, and it's usually try to be funny and then, maybe accurate. But really, it's just a conversation. Thanks for listening and all the downloads. Special thanks to the old guys who like old comics forum on Facebook. Guys have really been pretty cool. Welcomed us with open arms, and we appreciate that. If you have listened and you enjoy us, please tell a friend, because we, like every other podcast, would like to have more listeners.
Well, and also more engagement.
Right.
Not just listeners. Always enjoy feedback.
I do have feedback from the Kirby episode if we get to that later. So,
nice. We'll see how we'll have to suffer the consequences of somebody responding to our opinions with their opinion. How dare they?
Yes, how dare they? We have 50. I think this is episode 53. Might post on the Facebook page like kind of a summary of what each episode was to try and get your interest and maybe download some old episodes. Certainly season 3, which this is our best one so far. Our sound quality, knock on wood, has been pretty good. Nothing like our first season. So if you're just starting on the third season, well, I don't blame you. But, we did some good conversations in season 1 and season 2, and we are going to continue on as long as we can on this. So thanks for joining us. Mike, you were going to say what this book we're reading.
Yeah. This is a book, without giving the title, I remember even in the early years of our acquaintanceship, that where it was definitely, this was one you had kept talking about. And this was one that was like, oh man, that was a great story. Possibly the best story. Oh man, this was so great. And I had no earthly idea about this thing and what it was, what was a big hullabaloo or anything about it. That now goes back a few decades.
Yes, and this is from 1982 and 83. Yeah. That's where this series, Great Darkness Saga, Legion of Superheroes. Everybody who's listened to the podcast before knows I am a huge Legion of Superheroes fan, have been since 1980. Paul Levitz, Keith Giffen, Larry Malstead did this series. I had originally asked Mike to read, let's see, what was it? 284, Legion 284 to 296, and the annual. He did reply earlier today that he only read like 6 or 7 of those issues, which I'll forgive him. In certain circumstances, I'll forgive him on that. But he's missing out on some of the background, and I don't want to get into it. Yeah, Legion of Superheroes Great Darkness. If you haven't read it, well, we're about to talk about it. So spoilers ahead.
For a story that is now officially 40 years. 40 years old.
Man, wow. Critically acclaimed. It is the classic storyline. So it's the storyline every Legion guy will recommend you to read. And I am no different than those. And I'm dying to know what Mike thought of it. This is probably it's at least my 10th time reading this.
Dang.
At least. And I get something new every time I read it.
And you have these all in individual copies, right?
I do, but I also have the hardcover trade. Came out, the deluxe edition came out in 2010. So, and I have that edition just because I probably read those individual issues so much that they're probably not as mint as I wanted them to be. So I thought I'd just get another copy, save the original comics some wear and tear.
Yeah, in my defense, the only issue I did not read was the last one, 296. Which was kind of like quote unquote aftermath, or 295. Well, did I read this one? Sorry, I'm going through it. I did actually read that one. It was like a recap of the origin of Universo.
Yeah, the Green Lanterns. Why the Green Lanterns were outlawed on Earth.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was 296. That was the one that I was like, I don't know what this has to do with the rest of the darkness stuff, so I didn't read that one.
It had so much to do with it, though, Mike. So much.
I missed out. I'll have to bust it out then, because that was the one I was like, from the few pages I did read, it felt like a denouement of the denouement.
Right.
Kind of like... we've really wrapped this all up.
And it did. I mean, it didn't have direct ties, but it was, what happened to these guys after this huge event happened. Life goes on and terrible things continue to happen. Of course, the Legion of Superheroes is a team of heroes in the 30th century, all have different kind of powers and backgrounds and from different planets, and they unite together to form the Legion. Section that we read in the early 80s, I still think, that was the highlight. That was the peak of Legionness. That like the next 5 years between like 81 to 86 or 7, when it switched over to the deluxe format and all that, that was the peak Legion of Superhero stuff, for me, Paul Levitz was on top of his game. He knew how to handle 30 plus characters, and it seemed simple. Like he just moved them in and out like chess pieces, and each person had a different plot going on at different times, and you could tell his favorites, but he used as many characters as he could. Keith Giffen, like this art for Keith Giffen was my favorite. It wasn't too wonky, but it was still experimental a little bit. This group of Legionnaires, probably my favorite. He highlighted a lot of the couples, like Phantom Girl was dating Ultra Boy, Mon-El and Shadowlass. And yes, they all have little last names and lads and kids and stuff like that, which they later versions of the Legion tried to get out of, like Lightning Lad became Livewire and stuff like that. You take it for what it is, like I was telling producer Tony, our main heroes in the DC universe are Batman and Superman. So, it's not too much of a stretch if, Invisible Kid is still called Invisible Kid. What did you think about the art?
It was all over the place, and there's a couple things I had some question marks about. So I'm going to talk about the art. First, the very first few issues in this run was Pat Broderick.
Yeah, early Pat Broderick, not Keith Giffen. I think they switched back and forth.
So how long did Pat Broderick do prior to the point where I jumped on, which was issue 284?
Not very many, maybe one or two before that, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of getting involved in it.
There are stages in people's careers that they either are just starting out or they don't have all their skills in place yet. And this feels like somebody who's just starting out, and they gave them a title that may or may not have been that successful. So they thought, well, let's try you out on this title and see how you do for a few issues.
Right. Yeah. How would you like, hey, you're starting out. Let's give you a storyline that has at least 40 characters in it. Go ahead.
You'll find something. Yeah, you'll find something in here. I mean, there are aspects where it's like, I can see there was some progression, even in those few issues. His art got better, because I think some of it had to do with the fact that he was like, I got to hit these, deadlines, and understanding that a little bit better, and a little bit more confidence that comes in from having to do a couple of different issues here or there. And then I didn't realize, because I'm reading these in like a big kind of trade format. So I guess they had like backup stories. Was that always the case in Legion? Because several of these things have kind of a backup story. Because like Keith Giffen, that very first issue had done one with that Dream Girl.
Traditionally had a backup story, just for like a different tale that sometimes wove into it. Usually the writer would use it as to just highlight a character that necessarily had his own storyline that was going on, and they wanted, to emphasize it, and they had 8 pages to do it or whatever. So to highlight those characters that didn't get enough action in the original title, or
that makes more sense, because I mean, with it being the Legion of superheroes, you anticipated it being the full Legion, and then these backup stories could be, like you said, the solo or highlight. After those first couple of issues, then it goes into Keith Giffen. There is still a lot of Keith Giffen stuff that is always in Keith Giffen's work, no matter what style he opted to go with. There's a tremendous amount of Kirby influence, shortcuts that he would take, and still did take, even down to some of his facial structures and some of these other things that are like, he still draws like this, a lot of shadows. One thing that did get a little distracting, and I don't know if he was trying to say like helping out the colorist, but towards the latter few issues, he'd draw these 2 lines kind of arbitrarily down, and they'd follow the contour of a person's face. And it was just something that I know he was trying to say, like, okay, this is like either a shadow or a plane. So the colorist would come in and like put like a darker color on either side of these lines, and that way the middle was highlighted, or vice versa, that like there's a shadow being cast on the face, and it was like slightly distracting. That was in the latter issues. In the version I have, there is a segment that kicks in with we'll call it a later era Keith Giffen style. And I don't know how did that work, but it was kind of like they jumped in with like a story that took place in this time frame as a backup story, and they threw it in, even though it had like a more recent Keith Giffen story art style. So
I think they gave him more power on that or whatever. You're talking about when the Shadow Last Descendant in the headquarters and Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl were the only ones left at the headquarters and had to fight that creature.
Yeah. Where did that come into play? Because, I mean, obviously that cannot have been during this, like, you know, while he was drawing this, all of a sudden his art style instantly changes and then changes right back for the rest. So that threw me a little bit because it was like, that's the art style I kind of recognized when he went more simple shapes, bolder lines, blockier formatting. And it's like, wow, this is like when he was doing Dr. Fate, that Dr. Fate miniseries. This was like art from almost that era.
Pretty sure that was how it was originally. I'd have to go back to my original issues and see. I almost wanted to say that was like a few years later, Keith did an annual that kind of touched on the time back then. But I don't think this was taken from that.
Because there's no real reference that I'm seeing that this story originally appeared in. You know, it was just like,
it didn't. I think it was originally like his first trial doing that for the public, and maybe they wanted to see how people would react to his new art.
Yeah, because his later art was basically like, okay, people's faces are going to be completely in shadow. Yeah, I'm not going to draw a human face if I don't have to. I want to just put a big old black just bar across the, like, you'll see their forehead and that's all you'll see of this person. That style got really, I wouldn't say simplified, but it very different. And like, I think, you know, the heavier lines, like use a different ink pen kind of a thing, a brush for everything as opposed to anything tight detail. And then, you know, like, all of a sudden I went right back to the old style. I will say, anytime you deal with a group book, there is tiny people. Can't imagine having to draw all these characters, keep them, you know, distinct looks at such a tiny scale. Because, I mean, that's kind of what he has to do when you're like, okay, on this panel, I want 15 of the Legion members showing up. I'm going to jump a little bit off of the artist, but it will come back to being about the artist as a result. But that Paul Levitz dude was not afraid to use words. And
well, it was the 80s.
A lot of words. a lot of words. And so not only did you have to juggle tons of characters, tons of people on a single page or a single panel, you also had to deal with paragraphs of copy. And I was like, man, this is a Chris Claremont school of exposition. I was going to also, now I'm going to jump back again to the writing. One of the things that was interesting is that, you know, this is a story, you know, over several issues, you know, built on it, you know, several of the issues that, like Pat Broderick and so forth, is like, you know, a sense of something to come, a you know, appearance of something bigger brewing, kind of heralding this thing about to happen. But there was, and I did like that, but you also kind of forget that these things are at one point, you know, every month, and you never knew when a new reader was going to jump in. Every issue, everybody is called out by name at least 2 or 3 times,
right,
in conversation.
Yeah, one thing Paul Levitz wanted you to do is be able to identify them either by their regular name or their superhero name, and he did that several times just to get you be familiar with it, because he kind of wanted to bring it personal, like why are they calling him Lightning Lad, you know, if they know his name's Garth. So, you know, he kind of made it personal the same way Keith Giffen, who sadly passed away, and we talked about it 2 episodes ago, tried to stylize each character a little different. He changed designs on costumes to make them stand out a little more. He wasn't afraid to use technology ideas and just change it up and kind of unify it, where before, like, Legion was kind of all over the place with different technologies, and he would He would use his imagination to, like you said, Kirby it up, but be consistent with it so that it became more of a unified, familiar universe. I think that was their real strength, at least as a 12-year-old boy. As I was picking these up, I mean, you gotta remember, like you said, this came out monthly, so they had to repeat a lot of stuff while telling a bigger tale. And I thought the lead up was pretty good on this. There was, I mean, imagine, all the covers nowadays spoiled the big surprise, but reading it when I was in 1982 and 80, leading up to 83 reveal, sorry about the spoiler here, but that it was Darkseid. You didn't know Darkseid wasn't the big bad that he is now. He hadn't been used for a while. There were hints, but in 1982, I probably only saw Darkseid one other time, So when I was reading this, and none of the covers, had Darkseid's coming, and all that stuff. So that big reveal at the end of, one of the issues where, I think it's Darkseid, and you're like, what? So no way, how did he get so powerful? And of course, I look back all the clues,
the reveal
cloning and stuff. It was a big surprise. It was a big deal back then, not just for me, but for a lot of people. And unfortunately, there's no way nowadays you can't know that it's Darkseid, because even the cover on my deluxe edition has him on the cover. So it's not going to be quite as surprising, but it back then that was a big deal. That and the Judas contract for the new Teen Titans, those are the two pinnacle storylines that just had a surprise and you didn't see it coming. They pulled it off pre-internet, where no one had spoilers or anything like that. That's part of my love for it, is because I read it as it happened. And I was surprised as it happened, and there was no spoilers. And I was along for the ride. And it's a great time to be a comic collector back then.
Getting back to the art, though, there are a few things. One, the Legion spaceships, were they always based off of Star Trek, or was that like later editions?
Our earlier editions, certainly, they had that kind of
saucer section and the two nacelles and a kind of a bridge, not a bridge, but
certainly influenced, that's for sure.
I did get a kick out of, I think Keith Giffen secretly wanted to draw more Marvel characters, and not as much. He's kind of getting tired of drawing all these DC Legion characters, because quote unquote cameos are pretty ridiculous.
He liked shoving people in that didn't belong there. Sorry as I kicked my desk, but yeah, he's had Spider-Man. He's had a whole bunch of different characters in the background. That was kind of half the fun.
Little Easter egg popping up, because I saw Thor in a couple of the spots, and some of the other ones. I will say two other things that were of note, and I kind of wonder how often this was done, but the 2-page spread in the 80s, I don't really recall that happening really that often. And there was 2 instances of it in this run. One, which is one of my all-time favorite things of any time to see, and that is a blueprint. They kind of said, here's what the Legion Tower interior looks like.
Every couple of years they'd show what the version that they're using now, and they had just revamped all the technology, so they wanted to give you a new blueprint.
And explain it.
I love those as a kid. I would just read them and they go, ooh, and imagine what the place looked like. They used to do that with the Justice League satellite, do a cross section of that, and I just ate that stuff up.
It's pretty ridiculous. I mean, it's actually like a legit, I don't know who they hired, if it was Keith Giffen himself doing it, I don't know. But that's like a legit like blueprint drawn out, all this details and excruciating detail and thought into it all. And you're just like, wow, that's insane. And that was like a 2-page spread. You actually had to kind of go old school, turn it sideways to see the centerfold of this thing kind of splayed out like, wow, check it out. It's a whole blueprint now. And then the other 2-page was during the whole climatic battle with Darkseid himself. And obviously, clearly paying homage to, Michelangelo's creation of man moment in the Sistine Chapel. It was a little heavy-handed. I mean, I don't mind a tip of the hat here or there, but I mean, this one was like, whoo. Are you comparing yourself, to that amazing, masterpiece with this 2-page spread or what? But it was still pretty dang hilarious because I was like, wait a minute. Like,
I only know of Keith Giffen's. I don't know what you're talking about at all. I thought any other copy was a copy of that Keith Giffen one.
Yeah, Keith Giffen originated it. Michelangelo copied it.
Right. That's how I thought it was. Yeah, I mean, he did different art styles and Easter eggs, and he liked to play around with stuff. He certainly, he had a sense of humor and everything, but that 2-page spread changed it up a little bit. His panel work I liked. I think the coloring helped a lot.
I will admit, yeah, because a lot of these costumes aren't really that defining, and some of the characters have similar hairstyles or similar, that if it were not for the coloring, you'd be hard pressed to, because like sometimes, like if it were not for Brainiac 5's green skin, you could almost say, is that Lightning Lad? Is that so you absolutely have to have the coloration on there as well. Again, another confession, I've never read a Legion of Superheroes comic.
You still haven't, right?
I've not familiar with these characters beyond what you've kind of spelled out over the years. So the story picks up with Timberwolf getting a facelift.
Well, Timberwolf is my favorite character of the Legion, by the way. Prior to this, his face was more bestial. He still was human, but he had more of I don't want to say scarred, but it was more feral, and I was surprised as you when I originally read it that he was getting a facelift, but I think they wanted him to differentiate between Wolverine a little bit, and he wasn't so wild, so they made him a little more generic in the face. It was kind of lame until I noticed that Keith Giffen would change him back. Well, like when he got really angry and stuff, his face would revert back. Which I thought was a nice touch. And he wanted to do it for his girlfriend Lightlass, try to make it more human for her. And that's kind of where that storyline went. Each character, for such a populated book, they did have, individual storylines and stuff. Sometimes it was maybe a sentence or anything, but it throughout the series that they did, you could see how it wove in and out, and certain characters changed their look to be a little different. Starboy finally grew a beard, and he was the only character that had a beard, and I think Keith did a good job of trying to get people to look a little different. They introduced Block and some characters that weren't necessarily white humans, and tried to just generate a more sci-fi type atmosphere. As time would go on, they'd introduce more characters like that. There's so many characters. I mean, they even threw in the Substitute Legion and the Wander. They threw in everybody that they've ever encountered in the Legion for this Great Darkness saga, even, to fight the battles. And I was concerned that there's just so many people, it would wash away anything about who these people were. And you don't have to know who these guys are. If you've read other Legion stories, clearly you're ahead of everybody else. I don't think they were necessary. If you get the idea that every planet has a unique feature for their people, like Cosmic Boy's planet of Brawl, they're all magnetic, and Saturn Girls from Titan, they're all telepathic. It's kind of the same thing through sci-fi land. George Lucas's desert planet. The whole planet's desert. It's a whole lava planet. It's kind of the same thing here, where Dream Girl is from Naltar, and then they all have psychic or
precognition of some sort.
It's not that many characters that have non-planet powers. Like Ultra Boy and Timberwolf, they have individual powers that no one else has. I mean, in a way, Ultra Boy has Superboy powers, but either generic for their land or very unique, like Wildfire. So there's not a lot of in-between stuff. It's a lot of native powers, and then each planet kind of participates in this legion by donating a character, volunteer into the group. And usually they're the most, they're one of the most powerful ones, or stuff like that, so that they are heroes on their own planet.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about some of them. Like, how many are Superman / Superboy derivative?
Really, just 3, but there's some with lesser extent. You get Ultra Boy, Mon-El, and Superboy together. They're pretty much the same. And then Supergirl, of course. But, Timberwolf is fast and strong, but he doesn't have any of the other Kryptonian kind of powers. If you look at powerhouses groups of the universe, you could say the Legion probably has the strongest members. They have Mon-El at his prime. They have Ultra Boy, who can do all of Mon-El's powers, but just one at a time. Superboy, Supergirl, and then a variety of other abilities. But part of the Great Darkness saga was watching Darkseid manipulate the whole planet that Mon-El is from, and just having a billion Supermans destroying the universe. And that was pretty cool to watch, how one person could wipe out the universe simply by controlling, the invulnerable group of heroes, how much devastation they could do to the whole universe. So, part of the storyline was, here's all these superheroes. Even they can't take on this many, with the same powers. I'm always surprised more characters didn't die just because of the amount of bad guys around. But, you can't kill off your favorite guys.
Yeah, I was noticing that, because there's several times, this guy's dead. No, I'm fine. This guy's dead. Nope, she's dead. Nope. It's like, I was just in stasis. And it's like, that's a little bit of a cheat. And there was obviously clearly a reference to, because they have statues of members that have been lost. They had somebody like Reflecto Kid or whatever. They had put up a statue saying, like, yeah, we did lose somebody.
Yeah, and they've lost, out of any group that exists, they've probably lost the most members in the superhero kingdom. They probably 5 or 6 real deaths, at least in that old storyline. They've actually had deaths before, ignoring Karate Kid, who has died probably 3 or 4 times. Because Keith Giffen hated Karate Kid and kept killing him off, and it became kind of a joke. But in this series, he didn't die. Later on, he does. But they certainly had a mortality rate in their universe, even dating back to Triplicate Girl becoming Duo Damsel, because Computo killed one of her bodies, back in the 60s. And that never came back. She was always just 2 bodies after that. And
Triplicate Girl became Dual Damsel.
Right. So, they try to add some interesting plots and twists and things like that. It's a superhero comic, so, Jean Grey can return to life 1,000,000 times, and most of the Legion can too.
When you said the Wanderers, is that who this Dev M or whoever?
Dev M It isn't a wanderer, but he is a character that has shown up in the past, and he's another Kryptonian who shows up later, 30th century. I don't remember the original story. Later on, he shows up, and he's a spy.
With one of the most ridiculous costumes I've seen.
Yeah. And then you had Duplicate Boy, who could duplicate anybody's powers, and of course, he's usually duplicates a Kryptonian or Monel. When you have superpowered level at that height, you have to come up with bad guys or people who can also fight on that level. So you have to create all these characters that are also that powerful to make it a story.
Trying to sort out all that stuff because there was just so many people to keep track of, and then to make matters, and I'll say, kind of make matters worse. And I know from an art perspective, it's fine because it simplified things, but it's like we teamed up these symbols, and I'm like going, who's that symbol for? Meaning, like, instead of them writing out the person's name or taking a photo, drawing the person's face, or it was just like, here's a plus sign that stood for this character.
Here's a cloud.
Yeah, that's Dream Girl because it's got a little dream cloud in there, and it's like
you knew who it was.
It took a while, and it really did help with the annual because I think at the very first page of the annual kind of gave like here's a cheat sheet for those who don't know these characters, so that when you do see these emblems, you know who that's referencing.
Yeah, and the annual was where they got the new emblems. I mean, I think they used some before that, but this is where they really used it to try and show you, the holographicness of their new headquarters. They played Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
With holograms, stuff like that. He's trying to establish things that happen all the time. And so, they throw that in like 4 or 5 times. Dungeons and Dragons, Dragons. Apparently in the 80s, it was almost as popular as it is now.
It's never going to end. Hasbro's like going, thank you very much. I'm glad to know that in 1,000+ years, this game is still going to be going around and we're going to still make a ton of money.
That annual was really where I went, oh, this is really cool. And, I hadn't read a Computo story before that because it was before my time. Get introduced to the new Invisible Kid, and I hadn't really known who Invisible Kid was because he had died in the 60s. All these stuff that you get hints at. That annual really connected with me for some reason. Sure why. Like if there's one book I tell people to read, it really, it highlighted different characters and showed off couples. If you don't know the plot of the Great Darkness Saga, its world appears into UP space and they investigate it. Monel gets beat up pretty good and they don't know whose world it is. And then they have other adventures, they kind of get lost in some other things. And then these clones of these old time heroes start attacking and stealing things. And they take it back to their master and he absorbs it. He absorbs these huge enemies that the Legion had fought before, like it was nothing, and he knew like the powerhouse of this mysterious in shadow villain. And eventually, like we said earlier, he controls the planet Doxum and just sends out all these Superman level heroes to change the landscape of not only his planet, but of, destroy and kill everything you can see. And it's just a great battle, twists and turns, mostly coming around, focusing on who Darkseid eventually turned up to be. But a lot of characterization that was there before, but they really took it to a new level with characters starting to date, couples breaking up, and this really a soap opera while action was going on kind of thing. A new Legion leader in Dream Girl, who was such a minor character prior to these kind of storylines. And really the my only dislike is the trope of the little baby who grows up really fast and becomes pivotal towards the end of the story.
He was a chosen one.
Right. I just hate the storyline where the baby grows at exceptional speed and oh my goodness, he's an adult, or it's just I didn't like it in Avengers 200, kind of weird rapey storyline with Miss Marvel, and which we'll have to go over sometime. But this one, was a little better. Cool that Orion, shows up. And High Father, so there's some new God stuff in it, which we seem to tackle a lot of new God stuff without tackling a lot of new God stuff. Comes across in our storylines a lot, even from the beginning of Cosmic Odyssey through our last conversation about Kirby and Darkseid suddenly in the Legion of Superheroes. So.
I will say I can almost summarize this entire run in two descriptors. One is a lot of sweating and a lot of crying. I was really surprised how soap opera this series is. And
I would read I would watch General Hospital and then read
and then try to find the distinct differences between the two.
I gotta watch my soaps.
Yeah. Don't bother me, the stories around. In a good way, that the Legion wasn't like a lot of the more readily available books, that it was almost evenly distributed male to female ratio of characters, and most of them had been paired together in some capacity, and as a result drama ensues, and a lot of these characters are related in some way, so it's kind of like, this is one of those like creepy moments that I realized that I shouldn't think about these shows too much. In a roundabout way, in 90210, the twins Brenda and Brandon kind of like had some semblance of relationships together. If you think about who slept with who ultimately, and their little like triangle that Brenda slept with Dylan, Dylan slept with Kelly, Kelly slept with Brandon. And it's like, so when Brandon was sleeping with Kelly, who slept with Dylan, who slept with Brenda, it's like, that's kind of a little bit like, is there leftovers from somebody that's really creepy? The more I got to thinking about it, and the more I realized this is, any event, all that to say.
Only in this podcast can someone connect 90210 to
superheroes. Yeah, exactly. But it was like, that's my sister-in-law. That's my brother-in-law. And it's like, it's Chinatown, baby. It's just, yeah. And it's like, wow, there's so much. And then the drama of like, I can't be a superhero anymore. And it's like, we got to leave. It's got too much memories here. I'm out. Are you with me or are you going to stay? And it was just, everything was like, let's just go over the top with the drama on all the interpersonal issues that these superheroes have, which, makes this a very different title than a lot of the titles at the time. If this fit your wheelhouse and if this was something that was of interest, then I can see, this would be a great book. But if you were more into, I just want to see somebody punching another person in the face for 20 pages, this is probably not it.
No, you have to be soapy. A lot of it was relationship oriented. Certainly in these issues, it was. This group of books kind of paved way for Keith Giffen's 5 years later. Way down the road. If you weren't invested in the relationships reading 5 years later, you were going to kind of go, what? I'd have no clue why I even care. And looking back at this stuff, it kind of paved the way for it, kind of showed why you should care about some of these relationships and how much background they have with each other. Kind of like, early X-Men stuff was kind of dramatized. Again, the wordy writers had to dramatize a lot. Legion was no exception. Some of the early Teen Titans stuff was also like that, teen drama. And these were teens in a sense that they were probably 20-something-ish, just out of their teens kind of thing. At least the older original, they were certainly not teenagers, even though once in a while you'd go, well, that was just a couple years ago that I lost my body and turned a duo damsel, and in reality, it was 22 years ago in comics.
Comic time.
We've only been around for a few years, and how is that possible? It's the old, how is that possible that Batman has 5 different Robins in 3 years? Kind of thing. But it's comic time.
Trying to remember who's connected with whom. There was a throwaway line that kind of explained a lot to me, and it was early on. We can only have 25 members in the Legion. And I was like, why is that? For taxes. I was like, okay, well, that was kind of a joke, I guess. But at the same point, it's like, but I got to thinking, 25. No wonder it's called the Legion. It's like 25 heroes in what the?
It's kind of like when Henry Gyrich, said, hey, there can only be 8 working Avengers, at one time, so that we can control you better and stuff like that. I don't remember why they capped it at 25, but it was probably the writer going, please, or probably the artist going, I don't want to draw more than that. You got to do something about it. But I'm sure it was something silly so that they wouldn't have 100 members.
Yeah. But I mean, they still kept above that quantity because there was, like you said, the substitute Legion and
reserve.
Yeah. So, I mean, they went above beyond, but they were like, okay, here's our core 25. These are the ones we can't get rid of. They kind of come and go, reservists or whatever, but these are our core 25.
Yeah, one thing Paul Levitz did pretty good was just kind of, he came down to like his most favorite 12, and then everybody else would kind of rotate in and out. But you could tell who he kind of focused on for a while, and then it would shift a little bit, and he'd tell a different storyline with different core members. He tried to spread it out a bit. What are you going to do with 25 members? You're gonna park some, have some go on vacation, have some go disappear for a couple issues, so you don't have to deal with all 25 at the same time. And then when the big event comes, you call them all in and they fight.
Like I said, having never read these Legions, I did feel by the end of these 12 plus issues, I did get a sense of who was who, what their intent was. Some of them, just because like you kind of had to do broad strokes. I really like this person, and it made sense of the guy who can grow really tall is connected with the lady who can shrink really small. And so some of it's like, okay, yeah, I can see that. But
well, even that was a new relationship. Like, even when you talk about those two, Colossal Boy and Shrinking Violet, there's a storyline later that is hinted at here where it just kind of goes, whoa, that's a big twist. And it's all carefully plotted out here. Paul Levitz sending stuff 10 issues down the road before, something goes, whoa, that's why this happened, or that's why they suddenly got together. So there's more story to that than just simply, I can grow, you can shrink, we should get together. Want me to spoil it for you?
I'll probably not read any further Legion books.
Oh, you're breaking my heart, Mike.
Sorry.
You're breaking my heart. Well, it turns out, boys and girls, that Shrinking Violet isn't Shrinking Violet during this time. She has been replaced.
A Skrull?
And basically the Durlans of the Legion of Superheroes are the Skrulls, and she is a Durlan spy, and a big old twist. And then when you go back and read these kind of issues again, you go, oh, okay, there's a hint for that and hint for that.
That's cool.
So it is kind of neat.
Yeah, and I was trying to read these things in the context of them on a monthly basis. Like, okay, this is released, this gets released. Okay, now this is the first issue you've ever read of the Legion. Okay, the next issue is the first issue you've ever read of the Legion. So trying to keep that in mind, because it's like, I'm looking at like a splash page of one of these issues, and it's like, where is Chameleon Boy? He's not here. Lightning Lad. And there's like 3 people that are already called off, in the very first page, explain these characters fairly quickly. I didn't realize there's this whole subplot story It felt very throwaway, but it did have consequences, but it felt like, I don't know if that was just something to kind of do with the character without really having anything else to think about. But there's a subplot where they get frustrated with people not doing anything, and that Chameleon Boy decides to just take off. I guess he got introduced to his real dad again, 90210 melodrama of like, my real dad was you all along.
And R.J. Brand was the original, was there when the original 3 Legionnaires, they saved his life, and that's how they got together.
Oh.
So, like, he's a character that's been around a while, and they decided to make him Durlin, who couldn't control his power anymore. He was kind of trapped in the old white pudgy man, old man, and he actually is Chameleon Boy's father.
Yeah, so that's when I was like, okay. And then he gets mad and then decides to go on this like suicide mission and just causes more and more problems. And it's like, this dude is a whiny brat.
Yeah, almost as whiny as Lightning Lad.
And that was the other subplot that was like, boy, this is going on way too long. And I know it wasn't that important, but it took almost all 12 of these issues, and every single one of them had some reference to who's the leader around here, and let's vote on it. And I'm throwing my head into the ring to become the leader, and let's vote on that. And it's just like, oh my gosh, that big of a deal to be a leader. And then when they are a leader, it's like, I should never have been leader. This is too much, and I've cost too much. I made too many bad. And then the next person that becomes leader is, I should never have been leader. You know, I'm deputy leader, and I don't want to be deputy leader. This is not for me. And it's just like, oh, yeah, again, more layers. So it's like you have relationships, you've got political, you've got reference to like, you know, my mom is the president of the world. And, you know, there's that level of politics, and then planetary strife, and how does this planet work when everything is in medieval times? And yeah, like I said,
it's a lot.
It's a lot to try to digest. And I can understand, like, you know, if you've never read a comic book before and you're given any one of these issues, would you want to get another one? And it's like, man, there's so much packed in here that, like you said, you know, the payoff takes months to really, you know, get into it. Like I said, I read these 12 and I finally felt like, okay, I know who these characters are, and I know kind of what some of their struggles are, and I can, you know, without, I go, okay, that's that character, even though like one issue he doesn't have a beard and the next issue he does, and trying to sort out like, okay, so this is the one who's got that power. That's right. She can see the future, but there's not like somebody who's got the charisma to, you know, make people bend to her will or anything like that. And I kept thinking that's what her power was. And Light Lass and Lightning Boy, or like they're Lightning Lad, sorry. He's got electrical powers, but she's got like gravity powers or something.
Yeah, and they're twins. But she originally had lightning powers, but because back then you couldn't have the same duplicate power as another Legionnaire, like you can't have 2 lightning people. I mean, you can now. Back in the 60s, they thought that would be a fun rule.
Yeah.
Dream Girl actually changed her DNA to have different powers. So eventually she does get lightning powers back and loses her gravity powers. So she becomes the Lightning Lass. It actually turns out to be a pretty cool character. But I mean, if there's a power I would want least, it's probably hers.
Boy, I can carry a lot of boxes. I'll just make them very lightweight. There is in this series, like the first several issues before it gets into the whole dark side, obviously they start, you know, kind of hinting at things with just like these little preludes and these little, like something's happening, you know, heading towards a thing. But there was like this whole Kund, is that how you pronounce it? This whole empire.
Yeah, don't mispronounce that.
I know, that's what I was trying to.
The Kunds. Kuns. And Keith Giffen uses the Kuns later in, Justice League International. He'll do some stuff with Durland. He uses the races of the Legion and goes back 1,000 years and uses it in his Justice League stuff. He tries to use it consistently to make it, certain species are just exist, like, Romulans and the Vulcan, just kind of having consistency throughout the mythos and stuff like that. But Kuns, which is a warlike race.
Yeah. Kind of like
they fight each other. And that wasn't the first time they were used. They were used prior. Like they had a couple Earth wars show up once in a while and become important again, and then fade away in the background. And like the Dominators and all these that originated in the 30th century would come back and be used in the 20th.
Here's a question in the writing, and I'm going to ask this on your end. They talk about this whole, all these people coming from all these different planets, and they're all able to speak without any issues. They understand each other, not a problem, and even when they do land on that hostile planet, there's not a real translator issue. It's just, yep, we got it. We understand each other. You speak in a language I understand, and I speak in a language you understand. No dialect, no nothing. But the new Invisible Kid comes around. Everything he says has kind of a French accent. And it's like, what? So every planet out there speaks apparently English amazingly well, except for one person. And that's the only person in this entire book. Outside of that block or the rock dude, he at least has a different font for his speech bubbles. Out of all their travels and all the intergalactic races that they meet up with, there's only one dude with a French accent.
Okay, well let me tell you here what the Paul Levitz and previous writers, they created a language called Interlac, and they actually have an alphabet on it, and you can decipher things in the background. Issues around this time and later. Mm-hmm. So everybody speaks Interlac, and those that don't, you see Brainiac 5 is a genius, and he has telepathic earplugs that can change the language so you understand it. Language never is really a problem. Sometimes it is when storyline lets it be so, but other than that, Jacques Foucault, Invisible Kid 2, is from Earth, so he has a French accent. That's why. I don't know. He just does. He's the Gambit of the group.
Mon chéri.
Mademoiselle. That's right. That's it. No explanation needed after that. They just can do. It's how they survive in space. They have these trans suits that automatically happen. They have flight rings. They used to have jetpacks, and science has brought it to a flight ring where you can do wonderful things.
So
it's just science.
Yeah, because that leads to the other part, was the flight ring. Everybody's got one, right? I mean, that's handed out. That's how that Ultra Boy can fly all the time, even though he can only use one of Superman's powers at a time.
And Block actually has 3 to lift him up.
Oh, well, okay. That makes sense. I think I remember reading something about that in one of the issues here. But with that said, I was trying to sort out, there's a woman who uses the flight ring in ways that's never been done before. And it's all based off a will. I'm like going, are these flight rings unused Green Lantern rings? What's up with these things?
They're based on the will of the wearer. I mean, that's probably as similar as it gets to a Green Lantern ring. It's just the will that you can fly, but Dream Girl does kind of use it because they really wanted to show her to be really, really smart and not just good looking. So they made her kind of devise different ways to use things. Yeah. And she did, she created a formula to get Lightning Lass's powers to light Lass, so she's smart. But I think they were just kind of trying to highlight her right before she became leader, that she's not just a dumb blonde or whatever background on her. And this is, it's Legion tradition that every year or two vote for a new leader. And it used to be that the readers got to vote and send in their votes, and whoever they picked, if it was possible with their storylines, became the leader. So, I mean, like the audience got to pick who was going to lead the Legion the next year or two. And so it was kind of a cool thing. It was before the internet, so you'd have to actually mail it in.
Wow. That's a great way to engage.
I mean, right. And I do remember early AOL days. I think they did it once through the AOL America Online.
You got mail.
I think they did it once or twice through there too, that I did participate in. But so, I mean, yeah, they'd get you to choose your favorite Legion heir that you wanted to lead. And so you'd get Dream Girl, who didn't have a big part in the last, 3 years, 4 years, and suddenly, she has to be prominent and lead. So they got to build up to that storyline. So it was a good gimmick. I don't know any other group that did that.
And I don't know if this is a goof up, but this was just one of those things where whenever you're doing a mystery title or something you want to reveal over, a series of issues, and you always want to kind of put the main villain in the background or hidden or in shadow, so you never really fully reveal. There is a singular panel, and I know for listeners of this podcast, this was not going to help at all. But there is a singular panel where it looks as if Keith Giffen was given, like, okay, I want you to draw the main villain surrounded by his henchmen, put him in shadow, and he didn't. And so that when later on that main villain is shown as being Darkseid, this panel makes no sense. And it's a scene where they took the magic wand from the Doctor Strange analog, and then they just stole the Excalibur. And then it's like, okay, I got 2 of these things. Paul Levitz probably gave writing cues to Keith Giffen, but I don't know if he gave Keith Giffen like enough notes to say, this is Darkseid, but I want you to really make it look like, you can't tell it's Darkseid. But the guy's got the thigh-high boots on, but the costume, and he's got white skin, and it's like, who is this character? And then when it later is revealed that it's Darkseid, it's like, then who is this guy? So I don't know. You have an explanation for that frame?
In the deluxe edition, which I have, they have a script that Paul Levitz wrote for Keith, and it was pretty generalized. It was, here's what happens, but it wasn't by panel. It was pretty much subject for interpretation. So I'm guessing there was some of that. Do this, but not enough information to go, okay, but keep them in shadow. Or even if it did, I think there was just enough lack of information that it didn't get fully designed correctly. They did do a throwaway line that said, my clothes will burn away and my true form will revealed, or, they threw one line in there where his clothes burn away, and he explains it, that it's time to be me kind of thing. So
yeah, because this dude is clearly Caucasian. Like, Darkseid came from Europe.
You're a white guy.
Yeah. And I do like the fact that I know this is going to be a callback almost all the way back to the very first episode. Thanagar is referenced a couple of times. And the planet of the Hawkman, in the several thousands of years between now and Legion of Superheroes, they still have not decided that their outfits need an update.
That's true. They didn't get new outfits.
No updates. Just that little strap of cloth making an X across your chest and some pants.
And this series of books, I think it's the introduction of Oliver Queen's descendant doing the travel log, driving around, showing tourists the Legion of Superheroes. It was Queen something. Even that throwaway character shows up about 4 years later during a murder mystery. And, just throwaway characters like that. And showing Thanagar, they kind of want you to place it in the DC universe. So they got to throw in some things sometimes just to remind you that this is the future, especially when there's no Superboy or Supergirl around. And even before this series, Supergirl hadn't been around for a long time, so that was a big shock. But Superboy comes and goes depending on which decade he's allowed to use or not. Now, Martian Manhunter even makes a show later on and is known to exist in this universe, still alive as the Martian Manhunter.
Oh,
so they do some things that are kind of cool and a tribute to 20th century heroes, mostly try to keep to themselves as much as possible, especially after Byrne revamped Superman. And one of the mandates was he can't be tied to the Legion of Superheroes anymore. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what? How is that even possible? He formed the group. I mean, he didn't form it, but they came back. They were introduced in his title as the Legion of Superheroes. It's like he's mixed into their history pretty solid. They did this whole thing with an alternate world and this pocket universe, and if they had just left it at that, it probably would have made enough sense to keep going like that. But then they had to do a whole bunch of other things that made it super impossible to continue with Superboy, and it just became a mess after a while, and they shouldn't have touched it at all. I don't know. The Legion of Superheroes is such a love-hate for me because I love this era and this version, and there have been other versions that are okay. Certainly not the Bendis version, but there have been other versions tolerated. The what they call the Archie Legion, which was a total reboot, code names and some different storylines. That was, it lasted probably 10 years in itself. It was pretty good. It was tolerable. They had different characters. Princess Projectra was a snake, walking, giant snake. They took liberties and kind of updated. Even if they went back to that one, I'd be okay with it. I don't think they need to generate a new Legion every 5 years, though. I'm old. I want my Legion that I grew up with, but I would settle for a Legion that was kind of resembled that and not something that was totally pointless. And see, I'm starting to ramble now about Legion.
Well,
the Great Darkness Saga, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about it. You've been asking me to explain stuff. I want to know, after reading this, who's your favorite Legionnaire?
Yikes. Honestly, they all kind of I couldn't tell you.
Don't say they all look alike.
Yeah. I mean, they were treated so evenly that none of them really stood out as the breakaway character. None of them I felt like, oh my gosh, that's a brilliant character, or that's an interesting play on it. And the ones that I thought I would really like, because I thought I'd like Wildfire, but he's kind of a jerk. And then I thought, well, the Element Lad could be kind of cool, but then he's kind of whiny. And then the Chameleon Boy, it was like, oh, he did something really stupid and got himself as a traitor. And I think Mon-El, but then he's just Superman.
Yeah, but he's Superman with a girlfriend.
Yeah. Boy, and they would not let you forget it. Hey, love. No. Hey, Shady. Love. How's it going? Love, Shady. Love, Shady. Yeah, I was just like, oh, gosh. Every 2 seconds, it's like, man, is this a Hallmark movie? I mean, I kind of liked Ultra Boy. Dude, I could not tell you if there was a favorite. There's just so many, and I'd probably have to read another, dozen issues to kind of get down to a point. I could tell you who I didn't like, but to say, here's my favorite.
Okay. Who was your least favorite?
I would have to say that Chameleon Boy. And I couldn't figure out, some of these other characters, but the one that just had the most dramatic and, kind of whiny outrage and jeopardize. It's like, yeah, we're going to go to the home. I mean, that'd be like, it's like, I didn't get what I want for my birthday. I'm going to invade Russia. And like, what?
Right.
And then I'm going to bring all my friends. We're all just going to go invade Russia because they're going to. And I couldn't say that Matter Eater Lad because apparently he just was in a sanatorium.
Previous storyline where he ate this super powerful, he ate the Infinity Gauntlet basically. It wasn't called the Infinity Gauntlet, but it was the same power level to defeat. And so it drove him crazy. And
I always like it when they use someone who's a dumb character and they find an amazing way to use them. I mean, Alan Moore was always fantastic at finding that was kind of a throwaway character, but under the right authorship, they really help steer that character in a great way.
If you've got a favorite character of the Legion of Superheroes, you can write us at andthisiswhyilovecomics@gmail.com. Our webpage is andthisiswhyilovecomicspodcast.buzzsprout.com. You can join us on the X, formerly Twitter, at andthisiswhyil1. We're on the Facebook, and This Is Why I Love Comics podcast. Eventually we'll be on the TikTok again, but I'm not planning on it at the very moment. You can become a Patreon member for only $5. You can get a bunch of extra audio stuff and eventual other prizes.
Ramblings.
And ramblings, drawings. You could get
some of them there. Funny pictures.
Some special stuff. First dibs on some merchandise. Of course, if you give more than $5, we are very thankful. But $5 is all you need.
Gets you in the door.
To get all the good stuff. You can also support the show on Buzzsprout, but we'd rather you become a Patreon member because you get cool stuff. Thanks to all our supporters and friends of the show. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks to producer Tony, co-host Matt 2.0, Kevin, Jamie, and Matt 10.0. As always, thanks to Thunder Chicken for the tunes. Go check them out on Spotify. There's a link in the show notes, and give them some love. Just like we do, we give them love every time.
That we do.
Just some loving. Just some thunder loving.
The thunder loving?
Why can't you take it all away and be with me? Why can't love take us both away? This goes right through me. Right through me now. Right through me. Right through me now.
Stop those raging hormones.